The sun was shining on the packed martial arts gym, and the atmosphere was buzzing with excitement. People had gathered for a small demonstration, eager to witness one of the greatest martial artists of all time, Bruce Lee. Among the spectators, one man stood out. He wasn't just tall, he was enormous, a 130 kilograms weightlifter with muscles that seemed to ripple with every breath. Confidence radiated from him, almost daring anyone to challenge his strength. When Bruce stepped onto the mat, calm and composed, the crowd quieted. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't flexing. He simply adjusted his stance, eyes focused, body relaxed, yet perfectly balanced. Everyone could sense it. This was not a display of raw power. It was something else entirely. The weightlifter, noticing the quiet confidence, smirked. "That punch won't even hurt me," he said loudly, his laugh echoing across the gym. People nearby exchanged glances. Some laughed nervously, unsure if he was serious. Others were curious. The audacity of this man, mocking a legend like Bruce Lee in front of everyone, made the air tense. Bruce didn't respond. He didn't flinch or raise his voice. He simply looked at the weightlifter with a calm, piercing gaze that seemed to cut through the noise. There was no fear, no anger, just awareness. The weightlifter flexed his massive arms and repeated, almost tauntingly, "I can handle anything you throw at me." The crowd started to lean in. Something about Bruce's quiet composure was unsettling. The laughter of the weightlifter seemed louder, more ridiculous against the backdrop of Bruce's calm aura. Everyone felt it. The tension was building like a rope being pulled tighter and tighter, about to snap. And then Bruce took a single step forward, small, controlled, almost invisible. He raised his hand, as if to demonstrate a simple motion. It was not fast, not dramatic, not meant to intimidate, but it carried a strange, undeniable weight. The crowd instinctively leaned forward, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. No one knew it yet, but what the weightlifter had mocked as harmless would become the moment that stunned everyone in the gym. In just a few seconds, the confidence and arrogance that had filled the room would meet the precision and mastery of one man who could end a challenge without even raising his voice. What happened next wasn't loud, wasn't violent, but it stunned everyone watching. The weightlifter was still laughing, shaking his massive arms as though to prove his dominance. "That barely touched me," he boasted, loud enough for the entire gym to hear. The spectators exchanged uneasy glances. Some were smiling nervously, others whispering, sensing that this confrontation was more than just a display of muscle. Bruce Lee, however, didn't respond to the taunt. He didn't flinch, he didn't argue, and he didn't rush. He simply watched, calm and poised, like a predator quietly assessing its surroundings. Seconds stretched on, and the weightlifter's laughter began to feel louder in the quiet of Bruce's focus. He flexed again, stepping closer, almost daring Bruce to move. But Bruce remained still, his body relaxed yet charged with a controlled energy that seemed to ripple invisibly through the air. The gym had fallen into a tense hush. Every eye was on them. Even the spectators who had been chatting were now leaning forward, their curiosity mixed with apprehension. Bruce raised his hand slowly, showing the simplest form of a punch, a subtle, almost effortless motion. No wind-up, no theatrics, just precision. The weightlifter scoffed. "Come on, is that all you've got?" He barked, his confidence filling the room. But as the seconds passed, a strange silence began to creep into the crowd. Something about Bruce's calmness felt heavy, almost magnetic. It wasn't just a punch, it was intent, control, and mastery condensed into a single motion. People began murmuring. Some whispered to their neighbors, "He looks calm, too calm." Others exchanged glances with wide eyes, realizing that the man they had underestimated might be more than what he appeared. The weightlifter, meanwhile, began to shift slightly, his posture tense, though he tried not to show it. Something in Bruce's quiet gaze seemed to measure not just his strength, but his ego. Bruce slowly moved his body a fraction of an inch forward. The motion was almost invisible, yet the energy in the room shifted. The spectators leaned in instinctively, as if they could feel the tension tighten in the air. For the first time, the weightlifter paused. His laughter faltered for a split second. Just a moment, but enough for the crowd to notice. Do you think true strength needs to prove itself, or stay silent? The moment stretched longer, seconds feeling like minutes. Bruce didn't rush. He didn't need to. The room held its collective breath, knowing something was about to happen, but unsure what. The weightlifter, still massive, still confident, began to feel the weight of that calm presence. Each spectator felt it differently. Awe, fear, curiosity, or a mix of all three. But they all agreed, this was no ordinary display. Bruce's hand twitched slightly, a subtle adjustment, and the tension exploded into anticipation. People instinctively pulled out their phones, recording, whispering, even gasping quietly. The weightlifter's confident smirk now carried the faintest edge of doubt. He looked at Bruce, and for a moment, he realized he might have misjudged the man in front of him. The gym, silent and waiting, held the suspense in place. Every spectator felt it, the calm before impact, the pause before revelation. The weightlifter had mocked, he had laughed, but the air now hinted that the joke might soon reverse. In this charged stillness, Bruce Lee's mastery was speaking louder than words ever could, setting the stage for the moment that would stun everyone. The weightlifter's laughter had faded slightly, replaced by a tense curiosity. He still towered over Bruce Lee, still flexing, still confident, but the calm presence of Bruce had begun to unsettle him. The spectators sensed it immediately. Every eye in the gym was fixed on the two men, some holding their breath, others whispering nervously to their neighbors. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the room itself was aware that something monumental was about to happen. Bruce didn't move aggressively. He didn't shout. He simply adjusted his stance again, tiny movements that seemed insignificant but radiated control. The weightlifter, who had been so sure of his dominance moments ago, started to shift his weight slightly, his massive arms tensing in instinctive preparation. He was beginning to realize that this was not just a test of brute force. This was a test of precision, timing, and understanding. The spectators felt the tension build, each second stretching longer than the last. Bruce's eyes locked onto the weightlifter's, calm but piercing, a quiet assessment that seemed to measure every ounce of his ego. The weightlifter tried to maintain his composure, forcing a smirk, attempting to regain control over the energy in the room. But every subtle movement Bruce made, every tiny adjustment, every measured breath, added weight to the atmosphere, pressing down like invisible force on the overconfident giant. And then it began. Bruce moved his hand forward, slowly at first, a deliberate, controlled motion. The weightlifter tensed, ready for impact, expecting pain, expecting drama. The motion was deceptively small, almost insignificant, yet the energy behind it was impossible to ignore. The spectators leaned in, their phones ready, some gasping quietly as the moment stretched, the seconds ticking slowly, suspense mounting like a tightly wound spring ready to snap. 1, 2, 3. The weightlifter's confident stance began to waver. His laugh had vanished completely, replaced by a subtle shift in posture. He could feel something he hadn't anticipated, a precision, a control, an invisible force that seemed far greater than its size. The gym held its collective breath. The room was silent, except for the occasional shuffle of a foot or gasp of anticipation. 4. Bruce's hand made contact, a movement so small it almost seemed accidental, but the result was undeniable. The weightlifter stumbled backward slightly, his balance faltering, his confidence shaken. The crowd reacted instantly, some gasping audibly, others leaning closer, barely daring to blink. A moment ago, he had mocked Bruce, laughed at his punch, and claimed it didn't hurt. Now, that arrogance was meeting a force it hadn't anticipated. The weightlifter tried to regain control, planting his feet, flexing his arms, attempting to intimidate once more. But Bruce remained calm, his presence unwavering, his eyes steady. The spectators could feel the shift, not from speed, not from violence, but from sheer mastery and control. The 130 kilograms giant, who had laughed so confidently moments ago, was now trapped in a mental and emotional web woven by precision, timing, and calm confidence. Have you ever underestimated something just because it looks small? The silence stretched for a heartbeat longer, then longer still. The weightlifter's muscles tensed, his mind racing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The spectators were frozen, witnessing something more than a punch. They were witnessing a lesson in humility, in the difference between raw strength and controlled mastery. Bruce's quiet composure had spoken louder than any shout, any dramatic gesture, any show of force. Even the weightlifter began to realize it. There is no need for anger, no need for a defensive response, no need for drama. The disaster that had hit was not brutal in appearance, but it had shattered his arrogance and shaken the room to its core. Every spectator, every person watching, could feel the invisible lesson ripple through the gym. Strength isn't always loud. Mastery often whispers. The stage was set. What had started as a mockery of skill had transformed into a silent, mental, and emotional trap from which there was no escape. Every eye was glued to Bruce and the weightlifter, the anticipation now reaching a peak, the audience unable to look away, waiting for the next moment that would cement this lesson in their minds forever. Part 4. The room was electric, buzzing with a mixture of shock, awe, and disbelief. The weightlifter, still recovering from that subtle yet devastating motion, stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. He had mocked Bruce Lee mere seconds ago, claiming the punch wouldn't even touch him. Now, that arrogance had vanished, replaced by confusion and respect. The spectators were equally stunned. Some whispered to each other, voices low with excitement. "Did you see that? I can't believe it. How could something so small be so powerful?" The gym had transformed from a casual demonstration into a lesson in humility, discipline, and the raw difference between confidence and mastery. Phones were raised, capturing every second as the crowd collectively tried to process what they had just witnessed. The weightlifter planted his feet, attempting to regain his composure, flexing his massive arms as though to reassert dominance. But the air had shifted. The once laughing giant now seemed smaller, overshadowed by Bruce's quiet presence. The calm control emanating from Bruce was heavier than any weight, stronger than any muscle. The spectators could feel it. The energy in a room was no longer just about physical strength. It was about mastery, precision, and mental discipline. As Bruce stood there, relaxed yet unwavering, someone in the crowd whispered, "That's Bruce Lee." The Bruce Lee. The words traveled like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone in the gym realized they were not just watching a skilled fighter. They were witnessing a legend in action. The weightlifter's eyes widened, finally registering the magnitude of the man before him. He had thought he was mocking an ordinary fighter. Now, he understood that this was someone far beyond his reckoning. Bruce's gaze never left the weightlifter. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to flex. He didn't need to prove anything. The silence, the calm, the mastery, it was more powerful than any loud display of strength. The spectators were leaning in, eyes wide, their hearts pounding as they watched a quiet lesson unfold before them. The weightlifter's confidence had been shattered, not by a show of force, but by a subtle, controlled action delivered with perfect timing and intent. Even as the weightlifter struggled to regain his stance, the whispers of recognition spread. Some spectators, finally connecting the dots, murmured in awe, "That's Bruce Lee, the world champion." The legend, the weightlifter's smirk had disappeared entirely, replaced by a mixture of shock and respect. His muscles were still massive, his presence still imposing, but it no longer mattered. He had been humbled, mentally and emotionally trapped by something he couldn't understand at first glance. True mastery. The crowd's reaction intensified. Phones captured the stunned faces, the whispers, the subtle shift in energy. The spectators weren't just watching a punch. They were witnessing the moment arrogance met precision, ego met control, and ignorance met experience. Bruce Lee had never raised his voice, never thrown a dramatic motion. Yet he had silenced the room with one small, controlled action. The weightlifter's breathing slowed, his confidence slowly returning. But now it was tempered with respect. He realized that what he had mocked as harmless was actually a demonstration of the most important lesson in any fighter's life: control over oneself, mastery of technique, and humility in the face of true skill. Every person in the gym, from the smallest child to the largest bodybuilder, could feel the lesson in the air. Strength isn't just about size or muscle. It's about intelligence, timing, and the mind behind the motion. Bruce Lee didn't gloat. He didn't taunt or celebrate. He simply stood there, calm and collected, letting the lesson sink in for everyone present. The weightlifter finally nodded slightly, acknowledging the truth he had just witnessed. The crowd erupted, not in laughter, not in shock, but in silent admiration for the quiet power and wisdom Bruce had demonstrated. In that moment, everyone learned something far greater than martial arts. They learned that appearances could deceive, that arrogance could crumble in an instant, and that true mastery doesn't need to shout. It whispers, and the world listens. The gym was silent, save for the faint hum of excitement and the whispered conversations of spectators still trying to process what had just occurred. The weightlifter, still towering and imposing, had regained a semblance of composure, but the confidence that had defined him moments ago was now tempered with caution. His gaze kept flicking to Bruce Lee, trying to read the man's calm, unwavering expression. He had underestimated this legend once, and the reminder was still fresh. Bruce remained still, watching intently. His body was relaxed, but his presence was commanding, an invisible force that seemed to weigh heavier than the weightlifter's massive frame. Every spectator felt it. This wasn't a display of muscle. It was a demonstration of complete mastery. Bruce didn't need to shout, punch, or perform dramatic movements. His control over his body, his mind, and the situation was more powerful than any force the weightlifter could summon. The weightlifter shifted his stance, flexing subtly, trying to project strength. "I can still take you," he muttered under his breath, though his voice lacked the certainty it had held before. Bruce simply tilted his head, a quiet, almost imperceptible gesture, as if acknowledging the attempt but dismissing the challenge entirely. The lesson was clear. Raw power could never intimidate someone who had master control. Bruce stepped forward slowly and deliberately. Each movement was minimal, precise, and calculated. The weightlifter instinctively raised his arms, ready to block or strike, but Bruce didn't aim to harm him. Instead, he spoke, his voice calm yet firm, cutting through the tension of the room. "Strength is not about how much you can push, throw, or lift," he said. "It's about how well you understand your own body and mind, and how you use them with precision." The weightlifter's brow furrowed, his chest rising and falling quickly as he tried to digest the words. The spectators leaned in, captivated. Every word from Bruce Lee carried weight, not just in meaning, but in the energy of his presence. He didn't need to force respect. It was demanded by the quiet authority he exuded. Bruce raised his hand again, repeating a motion even smaller than before. It wasn't a punch designed to harm, yet the effect was immediate. The weightlifter's stance wavered, his massive frame swaying slightly, as if Bruce's controlled motion had found the weaknesses in his balance. The spectators gasped softly, realizing once more that precision outweighed brute force. What do you think is more dangerous, raw power or master control? The weightlifter took a deep breath, finally meeting Bruce's gaze without the bravado he had worn moments ago. I underestimated you," he admitted, his voice quieter, tinged with humility. Bruce nodded ever so slightly, acknowledging the recognition without arrogance. The lesson had been delivered, not through destruction or humiliation, but through calm, deliberate mastery. The crowd, still holding their collective breath, began to understand the depth of the moment. They weren't just witnessing a physical demonstration. They were observing a profound life lesson. The display had transcended martial arts. It was about ego, humility, and the intelligence behind true strength. Raw muscle, untempered by control, could be loud and intimidating, but lacked the subtlety, precision, and mental power that Bruce Lee had shown effortlessly. The weightlifter's eyes softened. He was no longer defiant or mocking. Instead, he exuded a quiet respect, the type earned not through fear, but through experience and understanding. The spectators could feel the transformation, the shift from arrogance to humility, from overconfidence to recognition of true mastery. Bruce Lee remained calm, never raising his voice, never gloating. Every motion, every word, every pause carried meaning. By the time the weightlifter finally lowered his arms completely, the crowd understood. This was more than a lesson in martial arts. It was a lesson in life itself. Strength without control is dangerous, but mastery over oneself is unstoppable. The room slowly erupted into whispers of admiration, eyes wide, phones raised to capture the moment. The energy of respect and awe filled every corner. Bruce Lee's presence, calm and unassuming, had dominated without force. The weightlifter, now humbled, nodded slightly in acknowledgement, understanding that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. It demonstrates through precision, control, and wisdom. The room was alive with tension, but now it had shifted from fear to awe. Every spectator's eyes were glued to the mat, where Bruce Lee and the massive weightlifter stood facing each other. What had begun as a mockery had transformed into a moment of revelation. The weightlifter, once so confident and brash, now looked uncertain, almost small, despite his enormous frame. His laughter had vanished completely, replaced by a dawning respect he could not hide. The spectators whispered among themselves, voices full of disbelief and admiration. "I can't believe how calm he is. Look at the way he moves. It's like he's in control of everything." Even the weightlifter, he's completely humbled. The energy in the gym was electric, a combination of curiosity, admiration, and astonishment. Phones were raised everywhere, recording the silent but powerful lesson that was unfolding. Bruce Lee remained serene, unshaken, his presence radiating quiet authority. He didn't shout, he didn't gloat, and he didn't exaggerate his movements. Each subtle shift of his stance carried meaning. The weightlifter took a hesitant step back, his muscles still tense, but his mind now racing with the realization that sheer size and strength were no match for precision, timing, and control. Every spectator could sense the weightlifter's mental struggle, the internal acknowledgement that he had been thoroughly underestimated and outmatched, not through raw power, but through mastery. The crowd's whispers grew louder as recognition spread. "That's Bruce Lee, the man who doesn't need to shout to command respect." Someone in the audience gasped audibly. "Even the strongest men can't intimidate him." The weightlifter's gaze dropped for a moment, finally meeting Bruce's eyes without bravado. There was no animosity now, only a quiet, humbled acknowledgement of skill far beyond what he had anticipated. Bruce stepped forward slightly, not to attack, but to close the distance with calm assurance. He extended a hand in a gesture that was part courtesy, part lesson. The weightlifter hesitated, then accepted it. The gym erupted, not in loud celebration, but in quiet admiration for the display of self-control, discipline, and humility. The lesson was complete. True strength doesn't demand attention. It earns respect quietly, through mastery and composure. Have you ever changed your opinion about someone after seeing their calm under pressure? The weightlifter exhaled, the tension in his massive shoulders melting slightly. He nodded toward Bruce, acknowledging the lesson, and the crowd cheered softly, recognizing the transformation. Bruce didn't need to force a reaction. His calm under pressure had done it all. The spectators understood now that the real power wasn't in a punch, but in the mental discipline and control behind it. The moment extended for several heartbeats. Every person in the gym felt the impact, not a physical impact, but a mental and emotional one. They had witnessed arrogance humbled, ego confronted, and respect earned without a single shout or dramatic strike. Bruce Lee's mastery had transformed the atmosphere. The weightlifter, now fully aware of his misjudgment, absorbed the lesson with a mix of humility and awe. Even outside the gym, the footage would later circulate, and millions would marvel at the scene. The lesson was universal. Appearances can deceive, strength can be misunderstood, and calm mastery can overwhelm arrogance without a single act of aggression. Every viewer, whether they were martial artists or not, could relate to the idea that confidence alone is not enough. Precision, control, and composure carry far more weight. By the time Bruce Lee walked away from the mat, the weightlifter stood silently, still towering but entirely changed. The crowd erupted into applause, not for a victory, not for damage done, but for a demonstration of respect, control, and intelligence over sheer size and noise. The legend of that moment would linger, a quiet but powerful reminder that the greatest lessons are often delivered without drama, in calm and measured ways. The gym slowly returned to normal, but the atmosphere had changed forever. What had started as a casual demonstration had transformed into a legendary lesson in humility, skill, and control. The weightlifter, once full of arrogance and bravado, now stood quietly, nodding in respect toward Bruce Lee. The spectators whispered in awe, replaying the moment in their minds, realizing they had witnessed something far more powerful than a punch. It was a lesson in mastery, composure, and mental strength. Phones were still raised, recording the aftermath, capturing every subtle motion and reaction. Clips of the event began circulating immediately, shared on social media, sparking fascination worldwide. People were captivated not by violence or aggression, but by the intelligence and calm control Bruce displayed. Comments and shares poured in, praising the quiet discipline that had humbled the seemingly invincible weightlifter. The lesson was clear. Power alone cannot intimidate those who have mastered themselves. The weightlifter, still towering and muscular, slowly stepped down from the mat. His face was thoughtful, his movements measured. He approached Bruce and offered a handshake, a gesture of acknowledgement and newfound respect. Bruce accepted it calmly, nodding slightly, his eyes still reflecting the quiet authority that had captivated the entire room. There was no need for words beyond that simple exchange. The lesson had already been learned and witnessed by all. Spectators were still buzzing, their excitement mixed with inspiration. Parents turned to their children, pointing out the importance of humility. Martial arts students whispered to one another about precision and control. Even casual observers who had only come to watch a demonstration found themselves reflecting on the deeper meaning. That true strength lies not in muscle, size, or loud displays of power, but in discipline, focus, and self-mastery. The story quickly spread beyond the gym. Videos went viral, with millions viewing the subtle, precise motion that had caused the weightlifter to stumble and the legend to be cemented. Viewers around the world shared their own reflections, noting how much the lesson applied not just to martial arts, but to life itself, how arrogance can be tempered and respect earned without a single loud shout or dramatic act. Bruce Lee didn't linger for praise or applause. He walked away quietly, leaving the gym and its spectators forever changed. The weightlifter, humbled yet transformed, remained for a few moments longer, taking in the reality of what had occurred. The lesson had been delivered perfectly. Mastery, control, and calm can surpass sheer force, leaving a lasting impact on everyone who witnesses it. The incident became legendary not because of physical domination, but because it showed that the strongest force in any confrontation isn't the one that hits the hardest. It's the one that remains composed, precise, and intelligent under pressure. Millions of viewers felt the lesson resonate deeply, sharing their admiration and reflecting on their own experiences with arrogance, ego, and unexpected skill. If you believe true strength is about calm, control, and respect, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more incredible stories that inspire and challenge the way we think about power. In the end, the punch didn't make the weightlifter fear for his body. It made him respect his mind. And the spectators didn't leave thinking about a fight. They left thinking about the quiet but unstoppable force of mastery, discipline, and humility. That small, controlled motion had created an unforgettable lesson that would be remembered far longer than any boastful display of raw strength ever could.